I was a young lieutenant, and my job, out of the 150 officers, I was assigned to the room, the control room, where we had all the walkie-talkies and radio that we could communicate with the downtown police department. My job was to take any information that came in and relay it to the other supervisors at that location. That's why I was there. We were listening in what was happening downtown. We heard when the announcement of the president's plane arrived, and when it left Love Field, and they had it was completely sealed off by officers, his path all the way to downtown Dallas. He arrived with very little fanfare out at Love Field, and we heard him. They were proceeding through downtown Dallas, and the first thing that we knew was wrong was when Chief Curry came on the area and said, "Go to Parkland Code 3, go to Parkland Code 3. And then he said, "Get some man on top of that triple underpass to see what's going on." Well, that's the first time we knew it happened. About that time, I was able to contact one of the officers at the scene, and he said shots had been fired at the motorcade. And then a number of people in the audience heard that, and it just like a wave went through all the people that were sitting at the chairs. And people were going to the doors, running to the doors, and the news media, a lot of the news media people were there, and they were running out the doors and running to their cars. So that's what happened essentially. And everything after that, I learned when I was put on a special task force to bring all this information together. And it's a long history of what happened. We could not get permission to disperse. Our last standing order was to maintain our position till the president arrived, and that's what we were doing. We didn't know where he'd arrive or not. Finally, I got hold of one of the officers there at the scene of the shooting, and he said it was a fatal headshot. And I reported this to one of the assistant chiefs, and I asked, what should I tell the captains and so forth? So maintain your positions for the present time until we know for sure what has happened to the president. We did. And an hour or so went by, and we're still there, and it came out that Officer Tippett was shot down. Well, that's when everything went all to pieces. So then we had the orders to go back to our respective sections. That's what we did. We went back to the city hall. One of the things that I remember more than anything else was a woman sitting at one of the tables, and of course the waiters had been told to bring out the food at a certain time, and they were. They brought out some food. This poor woman was sitting there. She was the only one there. Everyone else had gone, and she's sitting there crying and eating some of her food. I'll never will forget that. Mm-hmm. But it was a horrendous time for all of us. And we did not know all these things that had transpired until later on we put it all together. Lee Harvey Oswald left the 6th floor. They found witnesses that saw him shooting out of the 6th floor. And then the police arrived. They sealed the building, but they let people come out that were identified by management as being employees, and they let Lee Harvey Oswald out. We find out later on, he goes up the street, gets on the city bus to move out of there, and the buses can't move because of the jam congestion. Then he goes over on a taxi, gets in a taxi, takes the taxi out on West 10th Street. Gets out there, goes over to his apartment at 1026 Beckley, changes his clothes. From there, he starts, for some reason or another, to go to the Texas Theater. I learned all this later on when I'm on the investigative committee. Then he encounters our J.D. Tippit, who I knew very well. The witnesses said they observed J.D. stop the man, and they describe what I've seen J.D. Tippit do this a dozen times. He gets out of the squad car and puts a hat on the back of his head. He goes there and starts talking to him, and Tippit shoots him. Oswald shoots him. And Oswald then runs out of the scene, winds up in the Texas Theater. By that time, witnesses have described him to the police, and the word went out, and he's seen going to the Texas Theater. And that's where he's apprehended. Now, I don't find this out until later on. I'm telling you the story that transpired in them. They bring him to City Hall. So he's put in jail. He's arraigned. All the evidence is there on the 6th floor. They found all the shell casings. They found witnesses that he was there. They found witnesses that saw him shoot J.D. Tippit. So they think they've got this is it. This is it, no further. So they hold him tightly. He's put in jail. But the mistake we made, the following Saturday, they start having lineups of people coming in observing Oswald. Well, we didn't place enough security on the elevator. We didn't know what the seriousness was. A lot of confusion, a lot of going on. And then later on, lo and behold, I'm skipping ahead, but the next morning, I take loose and take my family to church out on Garland Road. And a young minister has come in, is talking to the congregation. I know I'm getting out of context of the story, but I'm trying to bring it back together. And he gets up and says, we're all to blame. We're all to blame for this. We should all suffer from this. I jump up and say something I shouldn't have said. I got my family. We go out to the car. We're driving home. And I turned to my wife and I said, did I startle anyone? And she said, no, I'm sure they were all thinking that, someone would jump up and say bullshit. And they were prepared for it. Nevertheless, I turned on my car radio, and this guy that's broadcasting said, Oswald's been shot. Oswald's been shot. Oswald's been shot in the basement of City Hall. And I thought, this can't be. This cannot be. Jack Ruby was arrested immediately after he shot Lee Harvey Oswald in the basement. job that we were tasked with was trying to find out how he got into the basement to shoot him. And what we found out was Ruby had sent one of his ladies a $25 telegram, cash money she needed. Western Union is at 11:30. He was there at 11:30 at the Western Union. We proved that. And from the Western Union, he walked up the sidewalk 420 paces. It took him 3.5 minutes. We know for sure it was Ruby because Ruby identified Sam Pierce as driving the car out of the basement of the City Hall, if that makes any sense. He knew Sam Pierce. So we know Ruby saw him. He told us that. Pierce was driving the car the wrong way to the City Hall out of the basement. The officer stood out, stopped the traffic, let that car out. When he did, Ruby was standing right there and walked 20 seconds down in the basement of the City Hall. He was there approximately 1 minute, according to all the records we could find, when Oswald was being brought out. He was handcuffed to Jim Lavelle. Jim Lavelle, they all went down, they got on top of him, they got the gun away from him. He said, "Hey guys, it's me, it's old Jack Ruby, y'all know me." So they got him up, and he acted as if they were going to dust him off and say, "Jack, you know you shouldn't have done anything like that." He told at least 3 officers how he got into the basement of the City Hall. He said he put a Western Union MoneyGram, walked down, and he saw the car come out and immediately turned down the basement, walked down 20 seconds downstairs. We're positive this was him. That's the way he got in. Now things got confused later on. They started talking about different entries and so on and so on. But he went that way down the basement of City Hall. He said, "Guys, I couldn't have planned this any better." He's absolutely right. If you tell people the story how that happened, they'll say, "That's impossible." How would he have known when? I don't know, but he did it. We know he did it. So Ruby was arrested, placed in jail. Later on, he would not talk to the detectives. But back to square one, our job was to find out how he got into the basement of the City Hall. We talked to 127 people, all police officers, civilians, so on and so on. And the fact of it is, we had good protection, but not enough protection. Now, Jack Ruby was an open book. You know, he had a club. He knew police officers, like every businessman like that. There was a scenario, if I can digress, back in those days when a visiting police officer came to town to work on a case that you were working on, it was customary for you to take him out. Well, the city of Dallas gave you $5 to entertain. Well, you could take him to Jack Ruby's place and entertain all night long, and that's the reason why you knew the police officer. Was he big buddies though? Well, yes, he was. Had he ever been arrested? Yes, he'd been arrested a couple of times. If you got in a fight in his club, he liked to get into the fight. He'd be glad to throw you out. He was that kind of guy. I'd only met him one time. In fact, I was working for J.D. Tippett when I was a rookie. He saw this man, Lemon. Oh yes, that on Lemon. About 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, walking his dog, and he says, "There's old Jack Ruby." And stopped and introduced me to him. Nice guy, snap-brim hat, had his dog with him. Come visit my club. When he was down in the show-up room, he gave out free passes to several of the newsmen. Come out to my carousel club. And if you want to go back and say, did he plan this thing? A month or so after all this happened, I ran across this gentleman. He said, hey, I was a friend of Jack Ruby. He said, I never told anyone, but he said, Jack called me when they put him in jail, and he said, he told me where his car was parked. He said, would you go down and get my dog out of the car? It's unlocked. He loved that dog. He said, I went and got the dog out of the car. Well, if he was good at it, if he planned to shoot Oswald, I don't think he left that dog in the car. He loved that dog. I mean, that's a trifling matter, but I think it's for real. Ruby was the kind of guy that almost all the police officers knew him. No one considered him to be a danger. He owned a club in Dallas. He was very familiar with the police officers. So that's how it happened. But you try to explain that to people, and they said, there's no way in hell that could have happened. Well, it did. And they say, there's no way in hell that all this scenario could have happened. You couldn't even write a script like that. The president coming into town, driving down through downtown Dallas, goes out to the edge of town or way out of town, and he's shot by a guy who is known to be there. But the FBI, they knew him. They knew he worked there. They checked on him. They knew his background. They knew he had defected from the military and gone to Russia. They knew he married a woman there. They come back to Irving together. They knew he went to Mexico, tried to go to Cuba. They knew he was arrested in New Orleans. And does this make any sense at all, what I'm saying to you? If not, if you think you're confused, you ought to be where I'm at. But they knew this. Were they negligent? I don't know. Hugh Ainsworth, a friend of mine in the Dallas Morning News, asked Gordon Shanklin, if you guys knew that he was there and he was a threat, why didn't you have him covered? And Shanklin's response was, we didn't want him to lose his job. So that's the story of Jack Ruby. That's the best I can tell. And it goes on and on and on. I'm constantly being asked, was there conspiracy that you know of, that you could think of? I don't think so. Could have been, but I've not seen him. There's all kinds of things you chase out. I know later on, I took all the files that were given to Chief Curry. It was sent out by the FBI to Chief Curry. He did not pass it on because there was a dividing line between the Dallas Police Department and the FBI. And that was because, there was an investigator that they had. I believe his name was Hosty. Hosty pulled his car in the basement of the city hall the night of the assassination. And he was going upstairs. And he saw Jack Rebel, who was the head of our intelligence. And he said, hey, Jack, we knew this guy. He was a communist. We knew he was capable of doing this. We had a file on him. This is all new to Jack Rebel. So anyway, this is what started the division. Rebel reported to the chief. Of course, the chief goes to ballistics, that the FBI's got all this information. They didn't let us know anything about it. Be that as may, Hosty went his way. Later on, he partially denied it. And right now, I wake up at night and think, how in the hell could this have all happened? But somebody dropped the ball. I'm not pointing the finger at the FBI. I'm pointing the finger at all of us. We could have done a better job. They could have done a better job. When Curry left office, they found a locked file cabinet in his room, locked up. They broke the lock on it. They found all kinds of files in his locked up there. Chief Batchelor, who was chief, contacted me. I was director. This is years later. I was director of intelligence. And he called me over, and I took the files. I'm looking at the files. I said, the only thing I can say, these are the files that we should have sent on to the FBI. Mm-hmm. So Batchelor turned them over to me. I took the files, locked them up. When I left the police department, I carried them home with me and locked them up. When I found out that the House Assassination Committee was coming to Dallas, I located one of their investigators. And I said, come up. I was in private business then. Yes. If you think it's getting crazy, you ought to be over where I'm sitting. They came out, looked at the files, and just went berserk. And had all kinds of recordings, pictures, so on and so on. I turned it all over to him, and I said, you've got it. You inventory it now. Give me the inventory, and you take the files, but bring them back to me. They did. Not long after that, they said, oh man, we've got it. We have Oswald on one of those tape cassettes you sent us. Oswald's on the tape. Someone's talking to him and telling him how to take a shot at General Walker. Okay, General Walker is one of these ultra-right nationalists that we had here in Dallas. And someone had taken a shot at him prior to the assassination back in April. Try to follow me on this, not follow the bandwagon. They took a shot at him in April. No one knew who did it. Time went on by. They had someone, Walker hired a couple of private investigators. Don't laugh, he thought the butler did it. They moved in next door to the butler. Yeah, I know it gets deeper than this. They moved in with the butler, and they had drinks with him. They partied with him. They were trying to get him to say something. Well, I don't know what he said, but I know the private investigator recorded the conversation of this guy. And anyway, he said, at the very end, he said, well, I take a shot at him for a certain price. They said, well, we'll get you the money. Well, the investigators then turned that recording over to the Dallas Police Department. And this thing just goes all to hell sideways. If we go off in left field talking about this, we'll be here all night long. But nevertheless, that's the recording that they had. It turned out to be nothing. It was a bogus tip. But then again, that's one of those things that we had to deal with, had to resolve. And they were disappointed because they really thought they had something. They had nothing. I testified for the House Assassination Committee. I don't know what they were after. They kept asking me, are you sure no one had any access to those files before you had them, or after you had them? No, no one did. Are you absolutely certain no one had them? No, they didn't. So they took my files. I made a promise they'd give them back to me. And then sometime later, I wrote a letter to them. Showed you the letter, asked for the files back, and they sent me a letter and said, we don't have any more files. We sent them to the National Archive. I don't know what they did with all the rest of the files. So anyway, the beat goes on. Every month or so, I'll get a tip from somebody who has important information about the assassination. If everybody that told me that they were at Dealey Plaza at the time of the shooting, if everybody was there, I estimate there would be 500,000 people standing on each other down there. But nevertheless, they're there and we're here. We're still surviving. So there's so much hysteria going on. But the theories are going to go on and on and on. And they're long-lasting. When I'm dead and gone, they'll still be going on. Someone talks to me about the conspiracy. If you know anything I don't know, put it in writing and send it to us. One I just received, and this gentleman here, he says he has absolute knowledge of a conspiracy that went on, and I looked at it. Somebody else that fell out of bed on his head. In particular, Jim Lavelle is one of the finest detectives I know of. He was handcuffed to Oswald. And I asked Lavelle, Jim, why did you handcuff yourself? Because that's not procedure. When you're taking someone through a crowd, a prisoner, you don't handcuff them because they can't defend themselves, and you can't defend them because you're handcuffed. He said, Captain Frisk told me to. Captain Frisk didn't want to discuss it. He didn't want to discuss it at all. And later on, Frisk made a move on Lavelle, and it was because of those things that occurred. Lavelle had demanded that they receive overtime pay for the work that they did, and how Captain Frisk did not want to give. He wanted to give compensatory time. But nevertheless, Lavelle went to work for me, and still a fine, good officer. Fine, good. Those things happen. What would we do differently? I don't know. I just don't know. I'll tell you one thing. I'd redirect the motorcade through downtown Dallas if I had anything to do differently. I've been asked what I would do with all those files that I have. What would I do with them? A couple of years, a couple of months, a couple of weeks, I'm going to turn 90. So I'm on my downhill run. And I want to be cremated at the end. What a nice gesture to have all those files and get cremated with those damn files. What a thoughtful gesture. Nevertheless, it's gone behind us. We'll still live with it. I'm dead and gone. The question will still be asked. No. But again, that's me now. There's no telling what might develop later on. The shots that were fired, one of the shots missed and hit the curb on the far side. It's one of those almost humorous things that happen. It's not the shooting, but the FBI came down there and they had someone cut out that curb. All the measurements, everything precise. We had people there watching them, and everything was perfect. Even where that shot had grazed off the curb for some reason. So they lifted it up. Okay, now put it in the truck. So these two workers, they took the piece of concrete and threw it over in the truck, and it broke up to. There's got to be some humor someplace. And that was there. Anyway, it just goes on and on. There's a million stories to be told about the same. I have been to I'm going to go off in left field. I've heard police officers tell stories. I thought, what? What are you talking about? That just couldn't happen that way. Could there have been another shooter? I don't see how. One of the guys had a theory, and it sounded real. He said that someone took a shot from underneath in the sewer line of the street and took a shot at the president that way. That's the reason why his head went back. Well, come on, give me a break. So, was it another shooter? I don't think so. It just doesn't sound reasonable. The dictabells I turned over to the House Assassination Committee, they determined that was a car backfire. That wasn't another shot. They thought it was another shot, but it wasn't. It was a car backfiring. It had to be. Was it another shooter? I don't think so. And so, who knows? I don't. The crazy part about it is Chief Curry said immediately, go to Parkland, go 3, get someone on top of the triple underpass and see what's going on up there. They thought the shot came from the triple underpass. It didn't. They proved that when you're shooting like this and the sound goes this way, it would automatically think you're on the triple underpass. We had an officer up there, and he saw nothing. So it goes on and on and on. Why do I think he did? I don't know. You look at his history, there was no conspiracy by anyone. If someone hired him to carry out the conspiracy, they don't buy a $16 rifle mail order. You follow the cash flow. He had no money at that time. Just like when he took a shot at General Walker, he ran home and told Marina, I took a shot at General Walker. He wanted to be recognized for that. And he thought he was going to be recognized for shooting at the president, I guess. I don't know. He was a strange individual.